talking about the video you made called What's the Problem? And it's a 30-minute video that I think is probably the first video that anyone should send anyone when they want to help them understand the reason of existence of Bitcoin, basically. When I look at your background, coming from physics, investment banking, entrepreneurship, building a company, it seems like you were also primed to get Bitcoin. But was that actually the case, you feel?
In retrospect, yes, but just far too late.
Okay. Yeah.
I had opportunities before, Bram, and I wasn't in the right space. Life pressures and focus and hearing it from the right person at the right time. So, obviously, like all of us, wish I'd found it sooner. But I do think there is it comes easier to some people than others. I think, especially with the layers of how accessible it is and how accessibly it's presented. And I think that's what we need to do as a community to improve the accessibility of Bitcoin to personality types and mental types that are distributed throughout the population. Like we definitely over-index in engineers and structured thinkers as opposed to the creative types generally. Obviously, you do get a mix, but it's more skewed, which makes a lot of sense given what Bitcoin is. Mm-hmm. But over time, we're adding just more layers of accessibility to it, and I hope, and I think that What's the Problem helps add an extra layer of accessibility to that, where you don't have to have any particular background to listen to a story. It's not like a children's story almost, doesn't it? Like we were all children once. We all, we remember stories, and it seems to resonate, I think, with a broader set of people than some of the content that we've created to date. Just because it's like just building another layer in the wall, and just making it more accessible to people.
Yeah. So were there any things, well, obviously there are things, I'd assume also from your physics background that help you and understand Bitcoin, but because you also faded it a few times, right? Even though it was presented to you, how do you look back at that? Because I think that's always an interesting point to talk about. I mean, many people say that they dismiss it, then they see it went down, it didn't die, and then they are kind of like intrigued, right? Like, hey, what is this thing? I thought this was dead. Although I saw that many times in the news or on the newspaper or whatever. But when they look back, they really realize that they weren't paying attention. And of course, it's easier to say that looking back. But yeah, what are some of the things that made you dismiss it, and how do you look back on that? And maybe how, or are there any lessons in there that we can share with other people?
I think it helps to hear it from the right source at the right time, and it's that combination. Like you can hear it from the wrong source at the right time, and it still doesn't come in because your preconceptions around the source compromise the information, right? And my brother told me about Bitcoin in like 2016, 15, 16, and I was in the city at the time. My brother took a very different route and sort of entrepreneurial side and became an actor and things like this. So him telling me about something that had its roots in the financial system, I immediately sort of dismissed it because of where it was coming from, and I didn't even put in a minimal amount of effort. And I look back and I obviously regret that. But it's like if I was telling him about acting, like he'd have dismissed what I was saying, So it's that combination of right message at the right time from the right source. And you got to have those things aligned.
And what helped you challenge your own ego then? Like, what was it that made you kind of like think twice and then realize like, hey, okay, this is something that I maybe should look into?
I still approached it through a fiat lens. From initially, it was, this is just a great trade.
Yeah.
And, you look at it from a macro perspective, and then you start to peel it back and you actually realize it's not just, a great trade. It's the only trade. And then just by process of going down that rabbit hole, your whole view gets turned around. But it wasn't like I had an epiphany around, decentralization or proof of work or anything like that. It came from, looking for asymmetry in risk and reward, and then realizing that actually baked into the asymmetry is the solution to everything.
It's interesting when you come to such a big realization, don't you think? That and it's so funny because I talk about this so much, like it sounds so good to be true. Like when you say this, like when people hear you say this, they'll be like, yeah, don't be so hyperbolic, you know? But isn't part of it, it's also a fun question to ask you. Like I've talked to many people that have a background in TradFi, right? And they say like many people in finance have no clue about finance. Would you say that's true in your experience? Yeah.
Because you have, in most of finance, it becomes very specialized very quickly. So, way an investment bank typically works. And I should caveat this by saying I was on the trading side as opposed to the investment banking side. And on the investment banking side, you probably have a greater level of transferability of core skills between sectors because, the process is probably largely the same. It's just sector specific. But on the trading side, you end up very quickly joining a desk.
Yeah.
So, if you join Goldman, it's like, I'm going to join equity derivatives and I'm going to join the single stock flow desk, or I'm going to join the warrants desk or something like that. So you end up trading like a very narrow section of financial instruments, normally also sliced by sector. So it's sector within a narrow slice of instruments within a sort of wrapper of derivatives or something like that. So you only see a thin slice of everything. But obviously the whole world affects what it is you're doing, what it is you're trading, and your speciality. But then you're sort of having to go the other way, because normally in life, you learn general things and then you become more specialized over time. In investment banks, it's the other way around. And, a lot of people who join investment banking don't come from an economics background. And we could sit here and say, well, actually, that's a positive thing, because if you came from an economics background,
eventually
you'd be further from the truth.
Yeah.
But, it means people come in sometimes without any material grounding in understanding the financial system at all.
Yeah.
And then you start from these esoteric products and you become the expert in those products without the bigger picture. And so, I can totally subscribe to that conclusion in general.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it like the way you describe it, it's kind of like, you're going to play a game within a game within a game. And like the origin of the game and the principal rules and all these things, like they are very far away from you. Right, as you, the trader somewhere playing a game of trading, whatever, right, in the sector of the sector, what you said. And while you were sharing that, I'm thinking like, it's similar as to like people that don't work in finance, right? It's like, okay, I have money. When you were a child, you were shown money. You went to the store, you gave money, you got a bread or lollipop or whatever, and you were like, oh, okay, this is money, and then you basically never questioned it again.
Yeah.
Right? And then you started working and you got money. Oh, what do I do with my money? Oh, you invest your money or you take out a mortgage or whatever. Right. And you're like playing another game within a game, within a game, but you never question kind of like the origins. And I think it's really interesting that many people that eventually come to Bitcoin, they have to first realize that everything they thought was true either wasn't true or no one ever taught them, basically. And they were like operating in a game, maybe again, within a game that they never quite really understood, but they were participating in it. And that's, I call that kind of like the red pill before you, or orange pill. Like that's a big realization. Like it's not a nice realization to.
It's not.
To have.
Not. You've got to go through that rage stage. Really, like that, where it starts to boil your blood before you realize that actually, holding that doesn't do you any good. And you need to step out and not give the system any of your energy anymore. But I think it's the same, not just at the lower levels in the banks. It's as you go up the hierarchy, it's still the same. It's still the same because you're so far removed from what ultimately causes all of these things, and everybody around you is in the same bubble. So nobody is talking about
what are we actually doing
money here? I don't think in my entire career anybody ever said about the debasement of money.
Bitcoin custody is evolving, and while self-custody is important, it has its own risks and trade-offs. OnRamp is pioneering a new standard, multi-institution custody, which eliminates single points of failure, adding fault tolerance and redundancy to your custody setup. OnRamp secures your Bitcoin in a segregated cold storage multi-signature vault, guarded by 3 independent institutional-grade custodians, none of which have unilateral control. Your funds are fully auditable on-chain, cannot be rehypothecated, and can only move or withdrawn at your explicit direction. Multi-institution custody removes the technical, mental, and physical burdens of private key management, providing unparalleled peace of mind for you and your loved ones. Bitcoin is money, and as the price continues to appreciate, OnRamp helps you seamlessly tap into financial services like trading, inheritance, insurance, loans, IRAs, and more, all without compromising on security or accessibility. Check out onrampbitcoin.com through the link below and schedule a consultation with the OnRamp team to get to know them and learn more about their offering.
Bitcoin is financial sovereignty, so why compromise when you need liquidity? Meet Debify, the Bitcoin-backed lending platform made by Bitcoiners for Bitcoiners. Debify connects you to institutional-grade liquidity and allows you to borrow fiat or stablecoins, all while keeping your Bitcoin 100% under your control with a non-custodial 3 out of 4 multi-sig escrow solution. Get competitive rates from a global marketplace of institutional-grade lenders, with loan terms that you choose, from 1 month up to a year. There are no hidden fees and there is no rehypothecation, just pure Bitcoin-aligned lending with the highest level of transparency and security. Are you ready to unlock liquidity without ever selling a single sat? Go to debify.com/Bram, that's BRAM, to check out their current lending offers. That's debify.com/Bram. Now, I spent 4 years in banking. I never heard anyone and even remotely discussing what are we doing here?
No. And you're actively discouraged as well from thinking about the bigger picture because of the specialization required for your area. So normally when you were trading or doing something, if you can't go and do you can't be trading any instruments, you can't be spending time really looking out, getting involved with anything outside of your small area. Because you'd be like, someone would tap me on the shoulder and go like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Like, focus on what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And so there isn't that natural room for education from within either. And I mean, you must get this as well, Bram. I've had so many people contact me on LinkedIn from within finance, in banks, and be like, I watched the video and I never knew this. Or people message me, they're like, my economics degree was a total waste of time. Just watch the video.
Yeah, I mean, we can laugh about it because it's just, I don't know if you, a few days ago before we're recording this, there was this video of Elon Musk sharing, he's doing the whole Doge thing. And he was at the Treasury looking up my tweet. I don't know if you saw this video, but like he has an interview with Ted Cruz. Did you see this clip or not?
The 14 big red buttons.
Yeah, there's like 14 magic money computers. Okay. And Ted Cruz is like, what are you talking about? What? And then Elon Musk says like, yeah, like the number you get in front of you of like a deficit or a budget or whatever. Yeah, it's probably like 5 to 10% off, which is huge numbers, right? Like for America. But then I quote posted this video and I said like, your money is so fake, you wouldn't believe it if you were told to your face, see below, like it's a grand illusion, but it's even when you're told to your face, it's just, so brutal. It's so brutal to realize that it's fake, like it's imaginary. Like the number on your screen is a number in a database, and the paper you have, like even when you were recently in America too, right? Like on the dollar bill, it even says like this is a note for legal tender for all public and private debt. Like they even tell you it's not inherently valuable, right? Like that the piece of paper, like it yeah, it's in your face, right? And so
but it makes it worse. It makes it worse because it's one thing to just be printing more of it, but it's another thing not to know how much of it you've printed.
Yeah, but then also ask your citizens to pay taxes on something you can print infinitely.
Yeah,
and they're all like, "Yeah, sure."
Is that clip from Bukele?
Mm-hmm.
Which is a great clip when he was at the Republican conference.
Yeah.
But
again, this is also
a topic around, you pay taxes to uphold the illusion that you need to pay taxes.
This is highly serious. Like people are spending their finite time and energy to earn a reward that other people can just create.
Yeah, and even with that clip, and even with Elon Musk's reach, it's not like there's uproar.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating.
I mean, you spend all your time working for something, your energy, your life, all your decision making, driven by something that you're forced to work for, that someone else can create for free, and people don't seem to care.
Mm-hmm.
They don't care enough.
And there's also no real option to ditch that currency, right? Like you are forced to use a certain currency, or strongly encouraged but in many ways, right, to use a certain currency in a country. Like you can try to pay with Bolivar in the US, but nobody wants to accept that, right? And so, yeah, I don't know how we got here. It's kind of a downer, but I think it's very important. It's just.
But it's great.
You mentioned talking to other people that you now sometimes use words and they're like, damn, I'm using certain words that are just normal for me, but they're difficult for other people. And it comes from, the study you do. I really want to talk about the video. I have a question about it, but it's just like, it's just so needed that it's made so much more simple. And that by itself, I think, is just very important to realize. Like, it's such a big undertaking to help people. Like, the evidence is all there. Like, it's all out in the open. It's not us. It's not our opinion or something. Like, this is just how it works.
It's not, but it's still very complicated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's so complicated for people. They're like, okay, well, the government prints extra money, but isn't that a good thing? Don't we need the government to print money? Like, there's so much deprogramming required from people to get to that level, to get to the outrage stage. And you should have outrage when Musk puts something out like that. Like, his reach should just be waking people up left, right, and center. But it's the level of complexity, I think, of like, okay, well, if that's true, then it goes against 10 things in my head. It's too much of a mental leap. And therefore, what am I going to do with the information? Probably just leave it at the back of my head and not change anything about my day-to-day life. And so, I would, I mean, the dream is Elon Musk reposts what's the problem. If he did that, it would be a massive leap forward to getting where we need to be.
Yeah. Last thing I want to say about this is that, so for example, that video, I'm clicking on it now. Okay. 4.3 million views. I think Musk retweeted, but even sometimes I think about this and that's a big downer for me. Like, even a video on Twitter with 100 million views is nothing in the scheme of the world, like in the size of the world, right? So even if 100 million people fully understand, that this is a real problem and they're triggered to look for a solution or study Bitcoin or whatever they decide to do, it doesn't seem like that much.
But it's about which 100 million people, bro.
That is true.
That's the key thing.
Yeah,
if you get 100 million people in the US, the whole world changes.
That is true. I agree. So in your video, like you said, like you made a story, and the story is about an island where people are stranded, and there's eventually two groups that use a different type of currency. And you describe like the characteristics of the different currencies and like what happens. There's a breaking point, etc. Again, like people should watch it for themselves. But you use the analogy of two different groups using different money to illustrate the effects of what is called the fiat currency, right? So the currency that's backed by nothing, that we are all, in our countries forced to use. Why did you chose that analogy to explain it? Like, what was the reasoning behind that?
Well, I wanted to try to explain where we are today is hard from a starting point. Most of the videos that we have try to unpick where we are today and sort of deconstruct it. And so I wanted to go from the opposite direction, to sort of start with the blank slate and show how we ended up here in a way which then just makes it so much easier for people, because at each stage you show them the next step. They agree that is logical, and the consequences of that next step are logical. And then you end up back where we are today, and then suddenly you've given them that mental framework to say, oh, actually, okay, I understand why the world is the way it is. If you try to unpick something really complicated, you have to explain upfront lots of things that people don't really understand. And by stripping it back and starting from zero, I could simplify the entire financial system just at one big red button, which is effectively what it is. Right, mm-hmm. It is what it is, but you couldn't do that if you were starting with the current financial system. And yeah, I think it works nicely, because it also allows the reader to understand, or the viewer to understand, what life would be like on a Bitcoin standard. And we don't talk about the Bitcoin standard in there, but that's what both sides of the island are on to start with.
Mm-hmm.
And the population sees the benefit of that. And it's only when they press the big red button on one side of the island do things start to spin out of control. But then the viewer immediately, innately understands what life is like, what life is like when money isn't corrupted.
Yeah.
And then the contrast is even starker when you realize we get back to today.
Yeah. I think that's a very interesting point, right? Because we talk a lot about, okay, this is the current situation, and when we implement Bitcoin, we kind of like go there. But in order it's kind of how I see Bitcoin now. Like, Bitcoin is kind of like a mirror. It's like this parallel system money system that just exists. And because it exists with certain type of characteristics, if you study these characteristics or get them explained, and you are able to compare them to this current system, what are some of the aspects that you think people have the hardest time conceptualizing, and why are they important to understand?
Well, I would say deflation is the big one. People think that's innately terrible, right? They struggle with understanding how things would migrate from the current world to the new world. And housing is a great example. And the second and third order effects as well. I think they can see how you get there, but then it's hard for them to let go of the need for government interference when things go wrong. Because we live in a society where everything is about de-risking. Everything is about removing personal responsibility. We're not allowing any asset prices to materially fall, mm-hmm. because we can't allow asset prices to materially fall. And I've had pushback on the video from mainly people who have a strong Keynesian background or are extremely programmed. right? And it's really the minority. It's really the minority, but it's people who have an educated background in economics typically. Your average person is like, this video explains the world. Thank you for making it. Right?
Yeah.
But the people who are deep inside the system, it is very hard for them to let go of those things. And, we could talk about them also, like deflation, housing, and then asset price revaluation. So maybe we do asset price revaluation first. I've had a number of people come in and say, well, what would happen if there was a COVID-like event and you lived in a world with no big red button? The government intervening to support markets, print cash, flood the system with money over COVID was a good thing. They stepped in to save everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And you can sympathize with the sort of that view if you viewed it as, well, let's leave COVID, the nature of the fact that it was COVID, to one side, because that opens up another can of worms as to where that came from, the degree of, etc. But they stepped in because a lot of it was enforced change by the government, right? And you can argue whether that was right or wrong, or whether it was required on health grounds or whatever. But primarily it was to stop asset prices falling. Because if asset prices fall, the system implodes. Because there's not enough pristine collateral at the bottom of the financial system to weather any material downgrade in asset prices. So you have to pump the asset.
Yeah. I think this already, sorry to interrupt, but I think this already is very complex, don't you think? Because
it is.
You have to go. So if we stick with this one for a second, right? Like you have to go back to the root. So like, what is the root of fiat money, right? Like if you can just create money, right? If you can just add more units to an economy, and you keep the same, the growth of products and services goes not as quick as the creation of units, right? And more units are chasing the same products and services, and so the prices of these services and products, the amount of units they ask for it just goes up because they are all competing for more units. I think that is kind of where to start with that thinking, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And
but because you can create easy currency, like debt is also easily created, and then people start to leverage on and leverage and leverage and leverage. And so that's kind of what the house of cards is made of.
Yeah, and it gets worse because with fractional reserve banking, you're effectively bringing more credit into the world. And as you loosen the credit and as you print more cash, the asset prices go up. People need to take out more loans to buy the same house. They have to take on more leverage. The banks, every time there's a downturn, the banks get washed out to a certain degree, require a bailout. So the small amount of capital they've held against the lending through fractional reserve banking gets slowly eroded. Every 10 years, there's a cycle where there's a downturn. Some people find some institutions have been over-leveraged. They either go bust or get rolled up into bigger institutions, which are then labeled too big to fail. The government quite often offloads some of the particularly poor credit portfolios from the banks into a national bad bank and effectively give them 100 cents on the dollar to recapitalize the banking sector. The bad bank then realizes the losses over time, which then gets covered by the money printer, right?
Yeah.
It gets nationalized, those losses. So you again,
which leads to inflation.
Losses, you print more units, which pushes all the asset prices up at the same time as the banks now have a fairly clean balance sheet again to do the same thing. And in another 10 years, you have the same issue. And each time it goes up, the banking standards have to lower. They have to be lowered to ensure ongoing solvency within the systems. Fractional reserve ratios will go from 10% to 5%.
They're at
3%,
1 and 0. Europe is 1 and US is 0 or
0. I mean, we're in make-believe terms now, right? Yes. You don't have to hold any assets against your liabilities, but they do this because the banks know they'll get bailed out. It's an asymmetric risk reward. If they do well, they privatize the gains. If they do badly, they call up the bank call up the government with the big red button. You have to bail us out.
Yeah.
Right. You have to create a bad bank, move all the assets across. We further centralize the system, and we go again.
If you have your Bitcoin in self-custody, where are you keeping your Bitcoin seed words? For me, there's only one way, and it's backing up my seed phrase with stamp seed. It's a single durable plate without any parts or materials. Stamp your words into solid titanium, which is fire-resistant, water-resistant, and built to last. Unlike etching or engraving, stamp seed's patented tools help you to deeply stamp every letter for permanent readability, making it easy for you to protect your generational wealth. Don't risk losing your seed phrase on paper. Get a stamp seed plate for unmatched protection. You can use code BRAM, that's BRAM, for 15% off at stampseed.com.
Yeah.
Right. And so what happens over time is the asset prices continue to go up, and they credit the pristine collateral layer, which underpins the effectively the equity in the system goes to zero. So you cannot allow asset prices to fail, otherwise.
Percentage-wise, you mean?
Percentage-wise,
right?
Percentage-wise.
So you have a set stack of let's say the collateral is 100% to start with, right? And because you create more units, it kind of goes like this.
And also it gets eroded over time as well, because you do take losses. And so when the banks take losses, they take some of it, but they don't get wiped out completely and allowed to fail. They get recapitalized and they raise more equity, but the equity base gets eroded over time as well. The quality of that gets eroded. And so you roll that forward, you end up with a cycle of more and more debt spread over a smaller and smaller number of centralized institutions, because they roll up the weaker players every time, with lower and lower lending standards and smaller equity base against your lending. This all points to you cannot allow asset prices to fall, because the next wave of insolvency happens so much faster, right? And it's more risky because it's over a smaller number of participants. And so if asset prices can't fall, you're absolutely not in a free market. You're not in a free market. And so you know what's going to happen. You're just going to press the big red button whenever asset prices take a dip. And so it is just a skewed trade. And it drives more leverage, more speculation, and eventually just blows itself up, right? Through the excessive money printer, which destroys the currency. It's the only outcome. And so to come back to the point that we were talking about, people would say, well, if the government wasn't here to print all that money over COVID, then we'd be toast. Right? Yeah, well, that's true, but because of the system. Right? What should happen is asset prices fall, the banks get wiped out, and then you have a free market mechanism where more responsible banks come in and take that place through capital formation, right? Because it's like an ecological process. It's survival of the fittest. That's how the free market's supposed to work.
And they have to adapt, right? You have to adapt as a player in a free market.
Exactly. Yeah. Whereas on a Bitcoin standard, firstly, you don't have fractional reserve banking, right? Because no one's printing Bitcoin. You have to, someone's actually got to be prepared to lend you the Bitcoin. But even so, if you just removed the big red button, what should happen in the fiat world is that asset prices readjust. And so when something happens, asset prices would fall. Asset prices falling is not inherently a bad thing for everybody. It's a bad thing for the people who own the assets. There will become a price where people who don't own assets, who own other things, such as, I was going to say money, but we can get into the definition of what money is. But people who hold dollars, who are not holding assets, if asset prices fall, those dollars will come into the market and buy the assets. That is a market. That is a free market, right? And this is what would happen on a Bitcoin standard. But what's better about a Bitcoin standard is that capital can move instantly at the speed of light anywhere in the world without restriction. And so
I think that's the scary part for many people. Like that would be a true global free market in that sense, right? And so you have instant global competition as well. And I mean, if we currently look at all the stuff going on with tariffs and trade wars and America, Canada, EU, and Russia, China, BRICS, etc., like that is where we are. But I'm thinking, like, what is the core of what people should realize? And I think you kind of glossed over it. It's something I learned way later, like what does privatized gains and socialized losses means, right? Like privatized gains means if the bank that you are banking with makes a profit, you don't see any upside of that, right? If they go bust, then your money is gone. Or maybe you have some banking insurance, right? People, that's a comment I get a lot. Yeah, but there's banking insurance and this and that. Yeah, and the state covers. And then I say, well, but how does the state get money, right, from you? Or they create it and they inflate everything, and then you still get stolen from. So it all comes from you, and that is socializing the losses, right? Like you share them across most of the society, because there's also people in the society that eventually profit from it, mainly very, very wealthy people, because they can take that hit and they have capital to scoop up any cheap stuff after a crisis situation. I think that's the main thing people should realize. Like, yes, you are a player in that game, in a game. Or maybe you think you're a player, but you're actually a subject, because eventually, with socializing the losses, you're the person footing the bill.
Yeah, it's you need to zoom out, really. And if you can zoom out enough, you can see what's happening. And what we are going through is not unique. The same thing happens over and over again. The majority of fiat currencies that have ever existed are dead. They all end the same way. You don't have to study a lot of history to see this. And so, but people, I think everyone finds it hard to some degree to zoom out from their own life and consider it. What's the bigger picture? What's the even bigger picture? What's the widest possible angle on this? And when you have a financial system which is complex, and the effective redistribution of risk and reward through the financial system in obscure ways, it makes it even harder. Because even just talking through how the banking system works, with explaining privatized gains and socialized losses, I mean, that's hard. That's hard. Most people,
a lot to unpack.
A lot to unpack, and most people, if you asked 100 people on the street how a bank works, 95% would get it wrong. Even in the most basic sense, they wouldn't know that fractional reserve banking was the thing.
Yeah, so that you lend out your money to the bank when you think you deposited it in an account. Yeah. That's basically what you do.
And in What's the Problem, I didn't even talk about fractional reserve banking. I didn't even lift the lid on Pandora's box there, because it's the big red button abstraction is ultimately what sits behind and enables fractional reserve banking, because fractional reserve banking wouldn't exist in the free market without the big red button.
It's actually I think fractional reserve banking is actually a tool to obscure the fiat money Ponzi, don't you think? Like, it's a way, it's like a mechanism that's added to, I think it's like the first abstraction layer away from the big red button, the money printer, which is the original source, right? And like, this is like just the second layer or first layer from it, because it kind of like puts that money creation in someone else's shoes, right? And then the central bank or government, they can kind of like blame them.
Well, yeah, but it also comes from the Keynesian side of things. It's like money creation. If you have, with Bitcoin, you cannot create money. Right, and so but by its inherent definition, it enables fractional reserve reserve banking, and through the Keynesian mindset, it's sort of empowering, passing down the empowerment from the government to the banking sector to bring credit into creation and inject money into the economy when it's not required. It's not required at all. It is the greatest fraud. I mean, that
it's fascinating.
Central banking and then fractional reserve banking.
Yeah.
It is the greatest mis-selling ever. Because if 95% of your customers don't understand what transaction they've just entered into, that's mis-selling.
Mm-hmm. Well,
in any other sector,
yes,
that would be fraud.
Yes, I agree.
Fraud and mis-selling. You'd have such massive liabilities, right? Instead of those massive liabilities sitting on the banks, it's effectively a legitimized fraud, and the liability is covered by the population through these banking insurance. And so every time you have one of these banking sector issues, the government steps in and say, well, we'll insure everyone's deposits up to 75,000 or 100,000 or 200,000 or whatever. And it will grow. It will grow over time. But it's the socialization of the losses before the losses happen.
Yeah, you're already accepting it basically as a society. When they say it, you're like, oh, okay. But it's like, it's funny. I didn't think I would feel like this in my conversation with you and how I know you, but it's actually pretty infuriating still, don't you think? Like it's so wild that what we talked about before, that why would you spend your time and energy for a reward that other people can just create by printing, like pressing that red button? Like just think about that. Like that entire thing that you work for, that is your reward in your life, that you basically base so many things on, like your quality of life, or where you live, if you have kids, who you're with, for some people the status and the things and whatever, like all these things you measure against something that is by definition not real. Like a real illusion, right? And that is by definition. Again, I don't think that should be registered as an opinion of me or of you. Like I think objectively you could say that it's an illusion, like it's not real.
Well, it absolutely is. I mean, there's no work required to create the thing.
Yeah.
You have to put work in to create the thing. Someone else doesn't.
Yeah. So when you release this video, and of course you get feedback from it, maybe there's some old colleagues that send you messages, and people send you messages, like you said. What's like the most surprising thing you've learned about human behavior, or the perception, or the psychology, also the things that we're talking about, since releasing the video or getting involved with Bitcoin? Like how has it changed your thinking?
That's a really good question. It reveals aspects of people that you don't get to see unless you're able to put something in front of them that you think is bulletproof, and yet they can't accept it. And they hold on to it. They hold on to a rejection of it on false premises. And even when you try to talk to them about it, they cling to those false premises. And so they end up being far less open-minded than you would have, or have a lower critical thinking capability than you would have thought. And, that can be disappointing in people. I'm sure you've experienced it as well. Like you have. The wonderful thing about Bitcoin is that once the penny drops and you find your people, you find similar-minded people who have gone through that same thought process. Like you feel like you're home, and you make so many more friends and connections, and it's like we're all decentralized, but we're aligned. It's like we have this decentralized alignment, right? And we don't use it as well as we should, right? Which is another thing. But
I agree.
But socially aligned, right? We're just not effectively aligned on other aspects. But I think at the same time, relationships with other people who are still stuck in the fiat world, those relationships inevitably change. Because there is, once you see it for what it is, and once you have that level of conviction that it's just wrong, the whole thing is a lie, the whole thing is corrupted. To have people stuck still in that mindset is hard, especially when you're close to them. It's hard.
When you say these words, what do you feel?
It's not logic. It's something else. It's something else underlying that.
But when you say these words, what do you feel? Like when you say it's corrupted, it's a scam. Like when I hear myself say these things, I'm like, yeah, I'm insane.
No, well, you know what? If I was
like 5 years ago,
for example, if I was the only one, Bram, I'd be worried about that. But when the first Bitcoin conference I went to was the first time I've met other Bitcoiners in real life to a meaningful degree. And the quality of people is just so high. It's so high. For people to have gone through the thought process with Bitcoin and to have arrived at the same point as you, but to have come from a totally different starting point, different background, it is a quality filter on people.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can walk into a Bitcoin conference and every conversation you have is a smart conversation. Every person you speak to is switched on as a critical thinker. And you have interesting conversations right from the start. You compare that and I don't want to kick crypto any more than it needs to be kicked already. But it's not the same if you walk into a Web3 conference or a crypto conference. It is totally different. It's like this. It is a filter. It is a filter, and so when you end up there, it's like it's a validation on your critical thinking.
Yes, I fully agree. That was also a big confirmation for me, right? Like exactly what you said. Like, hey, there's other people that ended up with the same conclusion, but in a totally different way, from a totally different background or age or whatever. I think that is very interesting. And again, if people that are not into Bitcoin listen to this, they're like, yeah, of course they say that, but that's okay, because I think what like I'm thinking about like what is the essence here, and it's kind of like what I just said, like the infuriating part, and what you just said. If you see this and if you understand this, and you see that other people are just happily. This sounds less nice than I mean it, but like they seem, they're happily ignorant while you are seeing the problems that they have and will have. It's just, it's kind of like a pity or sad, and like I would love to reach these people. I mean, I'm trying here, but it's really, I feel very altruistic about it.
Yeah,
and that gives me motivation also to do this. But it's kind of saddening. It's saddening.
It's saddening. That's the word I would use for it as well.
But the veil is so thin, right? Like all the things we're talking about, the veil of the illusion is very thin. So there's there's just a few things that if you get triggered by that, and I think there's a lot of these things in your video again, then you are not far away from the realization that that you are being scammed.
Yeah, and some people are much closer to seeing it than others. Because it's not always sadness. It's like sometimes it's excitement as well. Because you'll see somebody and they're like furiously arguing something, and then they'll explain their rationale for arguing that thing, and they basically explain why it's wrong. And you go like, you're so close. I can see. A couple more weeks.
Just call me. I say, call me.
Yeah.
There.
And and you get. I'm so excited for you because you're about to. Your world is about to change for the better.
Yes.
And so it's not just sadness, but there is sadness there. Ultimately, everyone everyone will be forced to make the change one way or another.
And so where do you see this going if we educate more people on the problem and eventually guide them towards learning about the solution themselves, right? What will the impact be on? Is a big question, but like the politics, economic structure, society, like what is your, like, what are your core thoughts there?
That's quite a big question.
Yeah, I know. No, more. Okay, let's rephrase it. Like, what for you are like the most important benefits of adopting Bitcoin, and maybe how do they compare to what we have now? Like, what's the biggest impact in your mind?
Well, I'll try and answer the first question, Bram, and try and explain how I think about it. And then maybe we can come to the second question in a minute. I think we need fewer people than you would think to switch. And this is why, I said earlier, if we had 100 million Americans, the thing would change very quickly. If we don't have 100 million Americans, but even if we had 20 million Americans who became ardent Bitcoiners, that would be enough. Maybe even 10.
Okay, tell me more.
Because what happens, it's sort of this then that thinking. It's consequential thinking. Because you and I know that we're never going to go back to the old system. And so once you've made that change, everything about your lives then becomes much, much clearer. Your decision making becomes different. And your decision making covers lots of different aspects of your life, like it's your spending, for example, like how you spend, who you spend with, what you prioritize spending on, who you vote for. And if every Bitcoiner ends up becoming or moving closer to just being a one-issue voter, which I think most of us tend towards, once you realize that the big red button is just the source of all these things. And so, there's no bigger issue than removing the big red button. So I'm going to vote for anybody who is furthering the chance of that, which means voting for people who are aligned with Bitcoin. I will vote for a Bitcoin over somebody else, doesn't matter for anything. So gradually you start to impact politics, and politics is about margins. You don't need 51% of the country. You need 5%. Because that 5% will decide the election. And then it becomes very clear, and you've already seen this in the US. At the moment, it's probably 5% because it's crypto, not Bitcoin. But over time, we know Bitcoin eats crypto. I'm confident that ratio is going to change as well.
Yeah.
And so it starts to seep into politics. You've already seen this in the US. There's nothing to gain from fighting Bitcoin. It's an asymmetrical risk reward. You gain votes by embracing it. You gain investment. You gain sponsorship. It helps you win elections. It doesn't just help you win votes. You don't just win the votes, but you win the funding to win more votes. Anybody who tries to fight Bitcoin loses. Eventually. Right, we've seen this. So it's very clear what you do. You embrace it. And the person who embraces it the most loudly wins the most votes. And then when you have more people in power in the democratic systems, and you can argue as to how effective they are or not, but if we ended up infiltrating the government at every level with Bitcoiners, no Bitcoiner wants a bigger government. And so the more people who become Bitcoiners, the smaller governments we have, the closer we move towards dismantling the ability to print money. But we'll do it via the back door, like the bit bonds. for example, and will recapitalize the system from the inside through Bitcoin. And you'll have some who take the lead on that, like the US. And then once the US start doing it, it forces the hand of everybody. And so really, you don't need everybody. You just need 5% of the US. And that feels far more achievable than trying to get everybody on board. But it doesn't happen overnight. But it's going to happen. It's going to happen. And so I don't have any doubt in my mind where this thing ends up.
What has helped me in my thinking is that the example you just gave, like you don't need a lot of people for to win an election, for example. Whether you agree with Trump or not doesn't really matter. It's more about the concept. So what has helped me in my thinking is to think about like things that have happened in the past are proof that it can happen again, basically, kind of like that. And so if you can explain that in a rational way, then you can also understand what you said risk reward before, but like what is the what is the anticipated reward, or what is the anticipated outcome? I'd almost say, right? And when you have examples of how not only the problem we talked about exploded before, right? But also this, what you just said, like you can win an election with a very with support from a group, like dedicated groups that have a certain viewpoint or interest or goal or whatever. And I agree that because it's been a thing in now in American elections, I think the first time it's really been a thing.
Yeah.
The next time in America, it's not going to be nothing, right? It's still a part of, like, you cannot ignore it anymore. Like it's in the political discourse, it's in the zeitgeist, basically, right? And you also see now that happening in other countries, like politicians talking about Bitcoin. We have a presidential election in Suriname coming up with Maya, who's a full-on Bitcoiner and has big plans. And so this idea is now in our reality, basically, right? And like you said, it's it's also an asymmetric opportunity for people that aspire to be leaders of a country. Like there's an opportunity for you to adopt this thing, and it's
it's a competitive advantage for people right now.
I'd say so. Yes,
it will cease to be a competitive advantage.
Yes,
because the Democrats will know next time round you don't fight it, you embrace it. Yeah. You've got to embrace it more than the other team if you want to win some of those.
Like, how do you do that? Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that's great.
But it just means that it just becomes table stakes for any political candidate. You've got to be super pro Bitcoin, because there's no other strategy. And then when to be super pro Bitcoin probably means you're going to learn about it. And the more you learn,
then you're going to be really into it.
The more you learn about it, you don't become less pro Bitcoin when you start learning about it. And so, one step leads to another, and then, before you know it, you've got countries where it's just taken as granted that everybody holds Bitcoin, either through their own holdings or through some sort of exposure via the national debt.
It's really an idea whose time has come, right? Like you just cannot unsee it. You cannot ignore it. It's not like, Bitcoin is just a fad. Like, it was a thing in the 2024 elections, but in 2028, we don't really talk about that anymore. Like that's not happening. So that there's a path where the message about the problem, but also about the solution about Bitcoin will constantly be amplified, because there will be more and more people along the way that learn about the problem and then the solution, right? And as everything we talked about, you cannot unsee that. You cannot ignore that. Like ignoring that is sabotaging yourself and your family and your future and all these things. And so slowly but surely, this will become a thing that's more and more undeniable in that sense.
Yeah, and on top of that, the people who do believe it have ever-increasing firepower.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As time goes on, not only are you growing the number of advocates, but they have more fiat equivalent in their pocket to do more damage, to drive the adoption further. And Peter McCormack talked a lot about this, when he was doing what Bitcoin did before he switched over. But I think Bitcoiners reach a point where once you've seen, and you talked about, altruism there. Once you've seen things for what they are, you want to try and bring as many people as possible across.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's the right thing to do. It's also the logical outcome. They're all going to get there anyway, so to try and help them as quickly as possible. But when you combine that with a financial freedom, which comes to Bitcoiners sooner than it comes to non-Bitcoiners, because of what is happening, because of the monetization of the asset, it means that the amount of firepower, the amount of impact that you can have in that outreach increases. And so, Peter McCormack is a great example, right? So he's now got the football club having a big impact on Bedford. He's getting involved in the community. He's trying to upgrade his community and make life better for everybody. Not because he's, is going to make him rich or, but it's because he wants to bring a better quality of living to where he's come from, right? And you're going to see this all over the world, from small things to bigger things, from small actions to big actions. And these are all the nice, secondary consequences of greater Bitcoin adoption, which helps to drive the wheel even faster. And it goes further, Bram. That we have, I mentioned decentralized alignment, and we have this sort of social ethos and, wanting to bring people along.
Mm-hmm.
But we also have a lot of latent power in the community that we just don't use. We don't direct our spending, for example. Some of us try and live on a Bitcoin standard. But it's hard. It's hard in certain areas of the world. It's much easier in small circular communities and these sorts of things. But it's hard in most countries. But we spend a lot of fiat between ourselves.
Yeah.
If you think about what we could do, the things that we could do if we just had greater level of decentralized alignment across us as a group, the amount of actual change that we could drive through free market processes. That is a big area of untapped firepower.
I think that I love how we kind of turned the bit of doom and gloom part of this conversation to a more happy part. I do think what you just said, I think eventually that is where we're going. But that exact subject also shows me that we have a long way to go. So yes, so like on one side, we don't need a lot of people to kind of be on the stage, be part in the zeitgeist, etc. And then for a long time to come. And as you said, Bitcoiners will only become more influential. A, because of more people. B, because of more firepower, right? But really getting to subverting, I'd say, the fiat money system, we have to. Well, we can just create that market. I'd say. I kind of, I see Bitcoin kind of as like the network state already. I mean, we're connected, and you're connected with other people. And it's like you said before, it's the connection with Bitcoiners is very easy, very global, very quickly. I'd say, I had a realization, I think like 6 or 10 months ago, like if I get diagnosed with some crazy rare cancer or something tomorrow, like 2-3 days later, I am somewhere. Could be Paraguay or Florida or Singapore, and I'm with another Bitcoin surgeon, crazy cancer expert guy. And I would pay him in Bitcoin to help me out, So I think that is conceptually already there. But there I do think we miss the amount of people. So I do think that takes more time to actually, make it easier to find people that you can hire for whatever product or service or help, and then pay them in Bitcoin, etc. Like, I think that just takes time, but that is okay. Once you understand, or like once you see that it's going there, then that's fine, I'd say.
These services are going to come. Most of what we've built as a community has been inward facing and all focused on bridging to traditional finance in some way, and financial products and things like that. We are under indexing on driving medium of exchange, unleashing the latent power that we have as a community in our spend.
So how do you look at the role of education then in driving Bitcoin adoption? I mean, you were drawn to this. You had the feeling like, I want to contribute to some way. You did it in your way. You have effect on it in your way, just as I'm trying to do here. I reach other people than you reach, and eventually that's a really good thing. But how do you look at that, like Bitcoin education in general?
Well, we need more of it. We need more of it. Since launching the video and just being blown away by the fact that people wanted to watch it and continue to want to watch it and share it, it's given me the opportunity to connect with hundreds of Bitcoiners around the world. We have a community now on X, Bram, and there's probably, 700 people, something like that, in that little X community. We only set it up a few weeks ago. But what I'm trying to do with What's the Problem is make it open to everybody. I can't. Educating people about Bitcoin is such like a gargantuan task, right? Because I don't feel like I know all the aspects of it, and then you don't feel this. You feel the same. So, if I can just try and focus on getting people to the starting line, and just focusing on trying to get people to want to watch Broken Money, right? If that's the narrow task, then
for you to put them to the next step, exactly.
For me, right. What happens once they start watching Lynn's video and beyond? That's for other people. Right? If I could just focus on that little niche, and we've had dozens and dozens of people from around the world do translations of YouTube videos, the materials. We've open sourced all the presentations are on Sats versus Fiat, so you can go and download them and do the physical presentation there's 20 plus languages there now, with speaker notes. So the idea is people can then go and take this to their own communities, because playing a video is not always the best thing.
Amazing. Yeah, I see it now. And you dubbed yourself, not?
Oh, well, I've got Jaime, who I will give him a shout out, is working with me. He's been working with me since the day before I launched the video. He randomly got back in touch with me after a long time, and he's been doing some sterling work, trying to work with everybody and take a lot off my plate, so I can do podcasts and reach out and try and grow this. So we've been tag teaming, trying to grow this as much as possible over the last few weeks. But Bram, on the education, I'm just trying to fill that little gap for as many people as possible.
I love that. I think it's interesting that you share like this. There's already so much work just in this first stepping stone of education. I'd say, again, I think this is one of the best, if not the best, stepping stone first videos that I've seen in 10 years in Bitcoin. So
that's so nice to hear.
I know it's true, and I think that's great, and that's also there's already so much that you can do to amplify just that, and I love that you said that, because it's also kind of like, yeah, you can just do the thing. It's kind of something that I'm thinking about the past few weeks. Like, yeah, you can just do things, right? So if you're into Bitcoin and you want to, sometimes I get a message and someone says like, hey, yeah, I want to contribute to Bitcoin and do something. Yeah, what should I do? And then I'm always like, I don't know. Like, what do you like? Like, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter what you would want to do. Like, whatever creative outlet you like or have or would like to try. Like, I wanted to try a podcast. Like, I wanted to start a podcast before, not about Bitcoin, but something else. Like, I always had that idea, like, hey, it would be so fun to do that. And then when I thought like, hey, I'd love to contribute to Bitcoin, what should I do? Then podcast came to mind, and I was like, okay, well, let's try that. And I had no experience in doing this. And I think that's also the fun part in that sense, in the education sense. Like, yeah, it literally doesn't matter what you do. Like, there's people making board games.
Yeah.
Explaining Bitcoin. There's people making children TV shows explaining money and Bitcoin, right? Like, it doesn't matter. Right. So whatever you'd want to do, just try it out. Like, you'll reach some people with your way of thinking about Bitcoin and your way of talking about it or explaining it. And yeah, I just love that. And I think you're another example of that. Like, yeah, you can just do it. And then, yeah.
Well, and all the volunteers, Bram, I was going to say a huge thank you to them, because we've not paid anybody. These are all volunteers from around the world who've got in touch, taken time out, in some cases taken a lot of time out to go and create something. And much to your point, it's like, it's contributing to Bitcoin in all of these small ways, and it rolls up into something meaningful. It really does, and everyone can contribute. I think one of the things is to sort of challenge yourself a little bit as to, what can I do on a daily basis to help push Bitcoin forward.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I feel exactly the same. And I think it's so fun that if you do stuff on the internet, you also don't really know where it ends up. So you cannot predict who you will touch with your way of explaining or talking about it, right? And I think there's a lot of fulfillment in that. If someone shares like, hey, what you said here or how you think about it has helped me improve my thinking or continue my learning journey, right? Like, that is just...
It's amazing. Yeah. You're right, Bram. But what's nice about it is that it integrates with the internet as well. Because you could say, oh well, the internet has helped spread. I'm not. Before people write in the comments, I'm not equating these two, but like spreading veganism or some ideas are able to spread more, and people find alignment with them in their life and become very passionate about them. And I'm not 1 second equating, the impact of Bitcoin with the impact of veganism, but it's, Bitcoin is obviously clearly very different in many ways, but Bitcoin is going to become the backbone of the money for the internet as well. And so, yeah, I mean, in all of our conversations, we haven't even thought about the impact of AI and, machines using Bitcoin and what that then means. So you've got this added layer on top of all the human driven stuff, which is the non-human driven stuff as well. Because machines are not going to use something that can arbitrarily be stopped by somebody else.
I agree. I think that's probably for a next conversation.
Yeah.
If I look at the time, I just want to ask you a last question, and I ask everyone the same question, which is, what is a core belief that you will never let go of?
If you base anything on anything other than human action, then it's incorrect.
Awesome. I love that, man. Well, thanks so much for this conversation. And
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy that we get to meet in real life in a few weeks. So we'll have some fun chatting even more about Bitcoin, man. So
Yeah, I
thanks
look
again.
forward to it.
Cheers.
All right. Thanks a lot, Ron.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, you can click here to find more just like it, and click here to find all Bitcoin for Millennials podcast episodes. Also, please like this video if you want to help shine a light on the message of Bitcoin, and subscribe to my channel to stay connected. I hope to see you for a next episode. Bye.